This next speaker, I'm quite sure everyone knows him. He's one of my favorite speakers because every time he talks, I learn something. To me, he brings things to me in such a way that it's always a lesson. There's always a teaching, and it's funny because, and I mentioned it to him because he delivers it to me in such a way that I can deliver it to my children. You understand? I don't need them to save me. I need them to help me save my children. And he says I embarrassed him, but if he were to come to my house, my kids would literally say, "That's Shane Claiborne." My mother listens to him because she says, "Who are you listening to?" And I enjoy it because it soothes me. He doesn't yell, he doesn't scream. It's just a nice little conversation teaching lesson. And with that, I'm gonna let him come up here and tell you guys. But Mr. Shane Claiborne.
Well, I go a lot of places to speak, but I come here to listen because as I've come to these over the years, I felt like this is just a summit of hope and healing. And part of the storytelling is, the old Catholic priest Henry Nouwen said we're wounded healers, right? We're wounded healers. And this is a group of folks that are healing together. And I just think, I hope everybody in the country listens to the people these next 4 days. And y'all that are listening in, spread the word. Tell everybody you know, like, listen into this because this is the healing stuff. I mean, Bill Pelkey, when I first saw him, it was in a documentary. Half the people in here have been in documentaries, but it's the stories I think that move us. And I started thinking, what can I contribute to this group? Because for me, I started to see this. This is bigger than the death penalty, right? This is about the death penalty. But the more you look into the death penalty, you see that this opens up all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's no coincidence that the same places that are executing right now were the places that were lynching folks 100 years ago. It's no coincidence that the same states that held on to slavery the longest are the same states holding on to the death penalty. So there's all that there, but it's also the theological piece of it, right? We're a diverse movement. We got people of all different faiths and people that aren't religious. But as a Christian, one of the things that haunted me is that where Christians are most concentrated in America is where the death penalty continues to linger. The death penalty wouldn't stand a chance in America if Christians stood up for mercy and for life and decided to abolish it. As my friend Dale Restinella said, the Bible Belt is the death belt in America. And so that messes with me. So I just want to offer a reflection to poke a hole in some of the theology. We're not going to go get too deep. I know we've been out in the sun. We've been doing it all day. But I just want to say, like, when you poll people, Christian, not religious at all, when you just ask people in general, is there a verse of the Bible that you know? The most cited answer is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. In fact, Donald Trump, who my wife and I call him Diggity, not to insult him, just because we don't want to say his name all the time. So we call him Diggity. So I'll just refer to him as Diggity. But Diggity, when he was asked about the Bible, that's the verse he cited, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, when you look at that, this is an old, thousands of year old framework for thinking about justice, right? That allowed for reciprocal harm. So it allowed for a person to hurt the person who hurt them back. It's actually called lex talionis, and that's a fancy word, but all it means is where we get the idea of retaliation from, right? So you could hurt them back in the same way, but there were all these constructs that showed you had to hurt them exactly the way that they hurt you. So if Randy, if you poke my eye out, I had to poke your left eye out if it was my left eye. If you broke my arm, you look nice. I'm sure you wouldn't. But if you did, I had to break the same arm, and I couldn't go burn down your mama's house or something. I had to only mirror the very harm that you did to me. Now, my rabbinical friends actually taught me a lot about this, because even my most conservative rabbi friends, who I've got some real conservative ones, we don't agree on a lot of things. But he said, but here's the thing. We never really use the death penalty. In fact, the rabbi said if there's more than one execution in 70 years, something's wrong with our society. And he said, you know, this idea of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, we know that we can do better. And he said that's why the rabbis used it as a construct, but they challenged the very construct itself. And Jews are against the death penalty. He said the irony is it's the Christians who are using the Bible, often the Hebrew Bible, to defend the death penalty. And then he goes, this is my rabbi friend, he goes, and you guys have Jesus. Well, you have to reconcile it all with, right? And so, but as you look at it, we know better, right? We know better. Like we don't rape people who rape to show that rape is wrong. We know we would never teach our kids that if someone pokes your eye out, you should poke their eye out. We know that we can do better than mirroring the evil. And that's why it's also so beautiful, you know, when Jesus does come, Jesus says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? Moses told you this, but then he tells us that we don't even have to return the harm. It might be legal, but that doesn't make it right, right? He transcends the law and says, don't even hurt them back. And that's why, I ain't trying to preach, I'm just saying, that's why it makes so much sense that Jesus interrupted an execution, right? One of the most beautiful, iconic stories in Scripture, a woman caught in adultery, because, by the way, it wasn't just capital murder that was a death-worthy crime. There are over 30 crimes that warranted the death penalty in Scripture. One of them was working on the Sabbath. I always say everybody but Chick-fil-A would be in trouble on that one, you know, but like all the disrespecting your parents was a capital crime. So anyway, this woman drugged before the town, getting ready to be killed, and all the men are ready to kill her with their stones, and Jesus interrupts the execution. It's odd, because the first thing in the Bible that it says is he dug in the dirt and wrote something, and no one knows what he wrote. So we just asked the kids, what do you think Jesus wrote? And one of the kids said, maybe Jesus wrote, where is the man? We're like, that's a good one, right? And one of the other kids said, maybe Jesus wrote, if this doesn't work, run, woman. That was my favorite. But we don't know what he wrote, but we know what he did next. And what Jesus did next is after he writes, I think maybe he was getting a little time, just getting a little liminal space. He stands up and he says, let the one who is without sin cast the first stone. And he'll remind us all that if you've called someone a fool, if you've hated someone in your heart, you've committed murder. If you've looked at someone with lust, you're an adulterer. Like, none of us is above reproach, and no one is beyond redemption. And all the stones fall, the men walk away, and Jesus is with the woman. He goes, where'd they all go? But it's beautiful, right? And so I think even across all different streams of life, we come together, and one of the most fundamental questions that the death penalty raises for all of us is anyone beyond redemption? Don't we believe that, as Brian Stevenson says, we're all more than the worst thing we've ever done? That we've always got to leave room for transformation. There's other questions too, right? Like, do we trust the state to kill? Come on, that's another night. But anyway, do we trust the state to kill? Like, one of the earliest Christian voices said, it is wrong to kill, whether it's done by an individual or by a government or a president or a governor. It's always wrong to kill. And that's what this group has been saying for over 30 years at the Fast and Vigil. It's people in this room who have every reason to hate, and you refuse to hate. As Dr. King said, I've seen too much hate to hate. Hate's too big a burden to bear.